But before I do, I'm going to share a story. Right now in my English class that we're taking, we're reading this book called Frankenstein. You've probably heard of Frankenstein before. Like when I first heard about it, I was thinking of the monster who, like this zombie dude, walks around with got the nails in his head or something. That's what I thought was Frankenstein. And then come to find out, as I'm reading this book, Frankenstein isn't talking about the monster. Frankenstein is actually the name of the doctor who created the monster. In a quick run through of the story, you have this guy, Frankenstein. He's a doctor and he wants to discover science and create the newest things. So he finds a way to create life. In that way, he's literally like playing God. So he creates this thing, the monster, and he breathes life into it. As soon as the thing comes alive, he's like, oh my goodness, that thing is absolutely hideous. Like straight up ugly. And so he just runs away, leaves the monster on its own. Then a whole bunch of things happen, but eventually Frankenstein, the doctor, his younger brother dies. And of course, he gets super sad, like, who could ever do this to my brother? Oh no. And we find out it was the monster. So here Frankenstein is like super mad that his brother passed away, but it was the monster that he created who murdered his brother. So he's so mad. Why did the monster do this? Why did he do that? It shouldn't have ever happened. And then the monster confronts Frankenstein, and Frankenstein is furious. Why would you ever do that to my brother? How could you ever do this? And then the monster's like, you can't talk until you hear my side of the story. This is where things change, because when you hear that first part of the story, Frankenstein's side, you're like, oh my goodness, who would ever kill a little boy? Whoever would murder him is completely wrong, no matter what circumstances. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you at all, because that's what I went through. I was like, who would ever do that? Why would that ever be something that's okay or something that he did? And then we hear the monster side. The monster starts going on. He's like, when I woke up, all I saw was a man running away from me. I didn't have any concept of language. I didn't have any concept of anything. He was like, imagine a little baby who was just born, but this monster was. He didn't know nothing. So that's what he wakes up to. There's no one to guide him. So he just like goes out into the world. Of course, the first people he sees are all these people who are yelling at him. He's like, he's a monster, and treating him terribly. The monster's like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. And so he goes through all these things in his life. Like he runs into this family. He has like this parasocial relationship with them because he feels like he's super close with them, but he only watches them through like a window or a hole in the wall. So they don't know who he is, but he knows exactly who they are. And then it gets to this point where the monster feels like he can go up to them. So he goes up to the grandpa of the family. Grandpa's blind, so he doesn't see anything. And the monster's like begging, please take me in, help me do what I need to do. Just treat me like a person, all these different things. The grandpa's like, oh, you sound sincere. I'm going to help you out. Until the kids walk in. When the kids walk in, these adult children, when they walk in, they look at him, they're like, oh my goodness, he's hideous. So they just like throw his stuff at him and run him out of the house. And then there's another incident where he sees someone drowning in a river and he goes and saves them. As he's saving this woman or this girl, he gets shot in the shoulder by someone else who was coming by. It was like, that's a monster, run away from him. He has all these things happen to him. And he also learned how to read. When he was reading one of the books he read, got him thinking about how he is kind of like Adam, the story Adam and Eve, and Frankenstein is like God. The only difference is that Frankenstein abandoned his creation. Because in the Adam and Eve story, God was there who like nurtured him and gave him all these things. So we get the monster's perspective. Like he felt abandoned by his creator and there was nothing around, and all the expectations that were put on him were the people who saw his face and treated him like a monster. Who is this guy? Even though he didn't do anything to them and didn't deserve any of it. So it really got me thinking about expectations. In this case, in this scenario, with Frankenstein and this monster, whose fault is it? Like, is it the people's fault for placing all of these expectations on him of being a monster? Or is it the monster's fault? And in the end, he makes the ultimate decision. The way I thought about it was like this idea of internal versus external expectations. Because the other thing you got me thinking about was this Shrek story. With Shrek, because I watched Shrek the musical and I was obsessed with this as a kid. But with Shrek, he is this ogre. As he's going out into the world, everyone treats him like a monster. So that's what he lives up to. Then eventually he meets Fiona and Donkey and people in his life who actually treat him like a human. And that's the reason at the end of the whole movie that he changes and goes through this metamorphosis of I am actually a person. I can live up to my internal expectations. as opposed to the external ones that are placed on me. So that's the story for this podcast. And that idea of internal versus external motivation, I thought that was really, really powerful. Now, back to this selfless paradox thing we got going on. I've been philosophizing about this a lot, like really trying to think through this thing. There was a day on Sunday or Saturday, I want to say, where I literally was in this room and I saw a chalkboard and some chalk and I was like, okay, let's get to work. So I literally spent like the next hour just drawing this up and philosophizing and thinking through this thing, the selfless paradox. And a reminder of exactly what that is, it's this idea that it seems almost paradoxical that you must be selfish, at least some level of selfishness, to be selfless. It's this idea of you can't give what you don't have. If you don't have any money, then you can't give it. If you don't love yourself, then you can't give love to other people. So in that sense, it requires some level of selfishness to be selfless. That's why I call it a paradox. Because like it seems weird that you have to be selfish in order to be selfless. And then taking that even further, is it like morally okay or morally good for you to be selfish if you're doing it for selfless reasons? Now, on the inverse of that, is it okay for you to be selfless if you do it for selfish reasons? Well, I feel like I might lose some people in this one. So check out, I think in the description or something, I should have like a PDF thing of what I drew up that'll hopefully make more sense. But the first thing or tool that I use when thinking about this selfless paradox is action versus intent. And I drew it out on this 2x2 table. On the top, you have action. On the side, you have intent. And within each box is like looking at something. If the action is selfish or the action is selfless, then what happens if the intent is selfless or selfish? And so look at the thing on the PDF because I'm going to run through it real quick. But the idea is this: if the action is selfish, the intent behind it is also selfish. I see that as self-centered. And that is definitely, I think, in my eyes, like a morally bad thing. Like being selfish for selfish reasons probably isn't good, or at least that doesn't get me closer to my dream identities. But then if we go over to something like being selfish with selfless intent, I see that as being self-reliant. It's like you taking care of yourself in order to be selfless. So I think that is a good thing in the sense, I think that's something Sisu would be okay with, would be fine with me being selfish for selfless reasons. But that kind of like has a check mark with a question mark with it, because honestly, I feel like that's iffy territory. There's some gray area there. But this part had even more gray area behind it. A selfless action for selfish reasons or selfish intent. That one really got me struggling. I was like, okay, what do I make of it? If the only reason that I'm doing good things or I want to help other people is because of my own benefit, is because like maybe I get into heaven, I'm like, okay, the only reason I give money away is because I want to get behind the gates. Or the only reason why I help people out is because someone will see me and recognize me for helping that person. And honestly, that one stumped me too, because I had this question mark behind it. But in the end, I think it's still like a good thing. I think Sisu would still say, okay, even though the intent behind it may not be the best thing, it still seems like you're doing good in the world. And hopefully, or eventually, you do it for a better reason or something like being self. So let's get into the last box that I had, which is selfless action with selfless intent. And that, I think, is self-sacrifice. When you actually do something not out of the benefit of your own, but to benefit others. That's like true unconditional love, like this Christ-like charity type of deal. That is what selfless action, selfless intent really means. Honestly, I was not really sure about this self-sacrifice word because I think it implies that you have to give up something of your own. So maybe I'll think of a different word for that later. But I mean, pushing it to the extreme, it does become self-sacrifice. It becomes you sacrificing all that you have in order for other people, which pushed to the extreme is honestly unhealthy in my eyes. But that's the idea that I came up with. And the end goal is to get in that bottom right corner of the box, like this unconditional type love where I do selfless actions for selfless reasons. Right now, I'm definitely more of the bottom left where I'm doing selfish actions for selfless reasons, like trying to be self-reliant, trying to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and on top of my health so that I can be there for the ones that I love, which is what I'm all about. Like loving myself so I can love my people, so I can love my work, that type of thinking. But eventually, once I do become self reliant, once I do take care of myself, hopefully it'll be more of a focus on serving other people. Not because of the praise that I would get or some reward, but simply because I love helping other people. And I think that's what Sisu would do. Sisu being my dream identity. Okay, now I want to come back to something that I think I talked about in the last episode, but I called it something different. Now I've come up with a name that I think is fitting of this thing, this mental model, and it's called the Virtue Vice Chart. Or honestly, I'm calling it the Virtue Vice Scale because it kind of looks like one of those old time scales, like the thing that in the courtrooms it's talking about justice, and it's like the scale trying to see. Okay, just forget about that. The only thing you have to worry about is that this Virtue Vice Scale comes from this quote that any virtue pushed to the extreme becomes a vice. I applied that to this selfish-selfless paradox. And I was looking, I was like, okay, where do I put selfless? Selfless is obviously it seems like a virtue. Being selfless seems like a good thing. But what happens when you push being selfless to the extreme? And I think what happens then is it becomes a vice, which is self-neglect, where you're neglecting your own health in the name of others, and you're not taking care of yourself. That's something that I don't think my dream identity, Sisu, I don't think that's something he would do. And that's the way to think about, or the way I'm thinking about this is like, what is a virtue? Question mark. A virtue is something that my dream identity embodies, or my dream identity would be proud of. So being selfless, I think that's something he would be proud of. But self-neglect, I do not think it is. Now I'm thinking, where would I place selfish? Is selfish a virtue? Is that a vice? And I think my dream identity, Sisu, I think he would place selfish as a vice on the other side. But then what would being selfish look like if it was a virtue? And I thought of self-reliant, like I mentioned before. If you're selfish for selfless reasons, I think that's being self-reliant. We're really trying to look out for yourself and take care of yourself, not just for the sake of, I want to be my very best, which honestly is a bad thing, but it's not just for your own sake trying to be your best. It's for the sake of others, for serving, protecting, and caring and loving others. I think that's what being self-reliant is all about. And after going through all these things, I realized I hadn't put definitions on any of this. So to put some definitions on it or operationalize them the way I see it, I think being selfish is putting yourself before others. Selfless is putting others before yourself, which you could see in those definitions. Taking both of them to the extreme is probably not a good thing. And then self-reliant is showing up for yourself. So really taking care of yourself, really making sure that you're the best you could be for others. Self-neglect is ignoring yourself. Now, doing all that philosophizing and taking these two philosophy classes that I'm in, I'm really getting to see close up by my professors and my team what these philosophers actually do, what they're all about. And I think I found these three superpowers that they are really, really good at. And the first one is that they're really good at empathizing. And what I mean by empathizing in this context of being philosophical is that they're really good at taking someone's argument, making it the best possible version of that argument. So straw man, if you've ever heard of the straw man, it's when you like attack someone's argument, but instead of attacking their actual argument, you build up their argument the weakest possible light. Then you attack that. Like, here's an example. I think a lot of people, at least in my school, they hear about this guy, Jesus. They're like, what the heck? There's no way that's ever possible. How could you ever like split the sea or do all these miracles? That's scientifically impossible. In that sense, they're like going at this straw man. They're not representing the arguments for Jesus or for the Bible or for Christianity in the best possible light. And in the same way, I mean, you can make the arguments Christians do that all the time too with atheist arguments. But either way, philosophizers, as I call them, they're really good at trying to represent the other person's argument as strong as possible. Then once they've represented that argument, then they go and try to dismantle it or rebuttal it. The second thing that they're super good at is interpreting other arguments. Like, for example, there are a whole bunch of times in my classes where a student would raise their hand and the professor or the TA would call on them. The student would give some long-winded, super all over the place type of response. Like, what the heck did that dude even say? And everyone in the class would be like scratching their heads like, bro, what just came out of your mouth? Because that did not make logical sense whatsoever. And the professor or TA, they'd be like, okay, if I'm hearing you right, you might be saying something along the lines of, and then they go on to reinterpret what they just heard into a logical argument that makes sense. That's something that I found they're super good at is reconstructing what other people say into a way that makes sense for them. And that kind of ties into the last one because like trying to empathize with their argument, trying to interpret these things to the best of their ability. And the third thing that I think philosophizers are super good at is trying to think ahead. Like what moves are they going to make? Like in chess, you don't just think about what's the next move your opponent could make. You think about what's going to happen like in 5 or 10 moves. And in the same way, philosophizers, they kind of do the same thing. They say, if I'm trying to make an argument now, I'm trying to predict what someone else would say. How would someone else object to what I'm bringing up? Then how could I rebuttal that? Then what would they say to that? And like, it's this never ending cycle of arguments and trying to think of whatever the next move is going to be. But right now, in one of my philosophy classes, we're reading Descartes. That's exactly what he does in his meditations. Descartes was this dude who's like this French guy who basically just doubted everything. He's the one who made this saying famous, the saying, I think, therefore I am. But in his meditations, that's exactly what happens. He presents one view and then he attacks that view and then he attacks the attacking of that view. Then he attacks the attacking of that view. And like a whole bunch of attacking, but in that process, he's thinking a bunch of steps ahead. I want to touch on the idea of switching costs, of habits and mindsets, and also activities and projects. And I think I heard this on a podcast or something, but it was talking about one of the laws of physics that says something will continue in motion unless it's acted upon by another force. Basically, if I roll a basketball down a hill, then eventually that basketball will stop if it runs into a house or something, or if it runs into a wall. And the reason it stops is because it's acted upon by another force. But if no wall was there, then it would just keep on going. Or if I go into space and I throw a baseball or something, or a rugby ball, that thing will just continue on forever because gravity doesn't act on it. And so he poses questions like, what projects or what things are you working on now that you're just doing because you've been doing it? Or what systems you use right now you use because that's just the way things always are. And if you went back to square one, you'd probably do something else. And that got me thinking about like mindsets and habits. Like what habits do I have in my life? What mindsets do I have in my life that I have just because they've always been there? And there's this quote, I want to say it's from Tony Robbins or something, but he says something like true behavior change comes when the pain of staying the same surpasses the pain of change. But in some way, I think this idea of like switching costs connects with this laws of physics where change comes when it comes because either something else acted on it or the pain of staying the same surpasses the pain of changing. But that was more of like a half-baked thought that I had in my head. I just wanted to bring it up because I thought that was a pretty interesting insight. Last thing, or last takeaway this week is this idea of be still. And when I heard those words, I was like, what the heck does that mean, be still? And I think what it comes down to is being okay in solitude. In a podcast I heard, he was talking and drawing the distinction between being lonely and being in solitude. It was like being lonely isn't a choice, but being in solitude is. And that's the reason solitude is more of like a positive thing. But the message behind all of it was like, be okay in your own thoughts and sitting with yourself, just thinking. I think that's what it means to be still. It's like one of the things that's super important to me in my mental health is undisturbed thinking time. All that is like me going on a walk or even doing this. This is undisturbed thinking time where it's just me thinking, talking, and debating through ideas that I have in my head, which for my mental health, I find is very, very necessary or very helpful. Now, moving on to my updates, let's start with my work. I think the biggest thing with my work is that I didn't quit actually. Even though the last one I said I would because it would help me like be more focused and stuff. I like hinted at quitting, but I didn't say the words. I quit. So I'm still working with Succession, the search fund, but I've lowered it to 4 hours per week. Not only that, but I like, split it up. So 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Thursday is what I think I agree to do. But I still haven't quit. Honestly, in that conversation that I had where I was low-key trying to quit, he gave me like a super valuable lesson of how to analyze data and use it and cut it up in a way that helps you gain insights into a business. So that was pretty valuable. The other thing is I found out I got into this thing called the GES Summit. It's a global engagement summit. Honestly, I just applied to it on a whim because I was like, whatever. Come to find out, they had like 1,400 applications. Only 30 people got accepted to this thing. So it had like a less than 3%, like a 2% acceptance rate. I felt so bad because like, well, I was looking at the schedule and I was like, bro, I'm honestly not trying to go to it, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It's like a social venture thing for students. So they invite students from across the world. So some international students are coming to this thing at Northwestern and they come on campus and I guess we have like some talks and networking stuff like that. But it'll be pretty sick. And all the classes and stuff. I'm staying pretty on top of everything right now. I kind of got into a good groove of things, but midterms are coming up. So I got a paper to write, a midterm to study for. So we'll see how that goes. With Deloitte, honestly, haven't done too much with them. It's like extremely light to the point where it's literally an hour or two a week. So nothing too serious. And then, of course, with Nesian News, after meeting with the people who run the garage, they're really trying to like challenge me to get me thinking about this community thing. One of the hardest things I think about being a founder and entrepreneur is trying to figure out what the heck to do. Because if you go to a job, like your boss will give you things to do and be like, okay, do this thing. Then all you have to do is go and do it. Like if I go work at McDonald's, they'll give me a whole checklist of how to make a burger. All I got to do is make the burger. But as someone who like works for themselves, you got to figure out where can you spend your time that has the most leverage and actually gets things done. Because what I've been falling into lately, especially like this last week, was doing a whole bunch of activities, doing a whole bunch of things, but not really knowing if those things are leading to any outcomes. And so that's something that I've been like really trying to figure out in this entrepreneurship game. But talking with the people who run the garage, they were like, okay, here's what you got to do. Go make a landing page, get people to sign up for this thing. So that's exactly what I did. This past weekend, I built up this landing page for Nisha Nexus, is what I'm calling it. Like basically copied and pasted what they had on the Hampton website, which Sam Parr runs. And it's hopefully going to be a community of Pacific Islander leaders to come and connect and hopefully be a good community like that. But built up the landing page, trying to convince people to join this thing. But one of the issues I found, especially with like these networking groups, is that people join and they like don't really care about it, or it's more of like an afterthought. And so it's like a very reactive community. And so to hit my $1,000 goal for the garage, also to make members more committed, I'm doing this thing where you have to pay like $100 deposit. It's refundable after like a couple meetings. If you want your money back, then you can have your money back. But tomorrow I'll put out this LinkedIn post talking about this thing and hopefully trying to get people to sign up for it. But today I talked with this dude, goes by the name Josh. He's a doll, but he's an entrepreneur who's running a whole bunch of businesses. I told him about this idea. He was like, yeah, sounds cool. So honestly, I think he's down to sign up for it, but I can't be completely sure unless he pays the $100 deposit. So I sent him an email. In it, it had the payment link for him to go and pay the $100, and he agreed that he would do it. But we'll see if he actually does. If he does, I think it could really add a lot of validity to this Nesian Nexus idea. But that should be cool. I'll let you know how that goes. Oh, and then I met with this person from New Zealand. She's another college student who's like trying to be an entrepreneur, who's my age, also a Pacific Islander, who's trying to do like things in business, and startups and things like that. But I had another one of those like podcast agreement things where we would post their podcast episodes on Nisha News. And that way, hopefully gather a whole bunch of audiences to this one spot, then all share the platform together. So we'll see how that goes. Moving on to update on my people. This past weekend, I went to Salt Lake, went to Utah for this thing called General Conference. And General Conference is basically like the biggest conference or the biggest summit for LDS people or Mormons. The main reason for me going was just to spend time with the family. And that's exactly what I did, which is why I'm talking about it in the My People update. But it was good, like being able to spend time with the family, even though I literally went there the trip was less than 48 hours. So I low-key didn't have much time to spend with them at all. But either way, you can never complain about spending time with the family. But now, on to the update on myself. This one is more serious because this past weekend, and it's the first time I'm saying it out loud, I was binge eating. again. I think in the last episode or the episode before that, I was like, okay, overcame binge eating. I'm not addicted to food anymore. And said that this weekend I was binging. And I think a lot of that came down to me being super tired and traveling. So I'm noticing something, especially when I travel, when I'm super tired is when I tend to binge eat. And usually what binge eating does is it's like running away from the problems that I'm going through. And I think the problems that I was going through was probably just being super tired and probably some level of stress about Ninja News and school and stuff. But I honestly wasn't that stressed out, so I don't think it was stress. I think it was more of just being tired, probably. Saying it now, I think is a good thing because addiction isn't this thing where it's like, okay, you snap your fingers, you're completely over it. I don't struggle with it anymore. I think this is the real of an addiction. Like it's something that keeps coming up, and it's not one day you snap your fingers and you don't have to worry about it, but it's this constant thing of I'm trying to better myself. So that's the update on myself, and obviously, like my physical health was out of whack. So my mental health was pretty decent, honestly, considering my physical health was pretty out of whack. But the biggest thing it got me thinking about was my goals. Oh, I think my biggest constraint right now in my life is definitely my physical health. And I want to place more of an emphasis on that, on taking care of myself, because it doesn't matter all of these other things I'm doing for my work, for my people. None of that really matters if at the end of the day I can't take care of myself. Right now, that's kind of feels like what I'm doing, where I'm pouring all these hours and time and energy into work when in reality I'm not taking care of myself, which means I'm not like as healthy as I want to be for myself. And hopefully, after I do become self reliant and after I do become a healthy person, someone who's able to take care of myself, then I can go and serve others. But right now, I think that is my biggest constraint. So that is what I'm going to dedicate this next 3 months to. I put it down in my Notion page for like this life dashboard or scorecard, something that I could really keep track of my goals. Because one of my other goals is trying to learn Tongan, which I'm doing right now. I'm like saying prayers and reading and journaling all in Tongan, which honestly is helping a bunch. Maybe I'll do like a Tongan special section for this podcast to help me keep learning it, keep practicing. But one of my goals is to like say a full coherent prayer in Tongan, like sound natural. So by the end of this next 3 months, so by I want to say July, that's what I want to do. Also, I want to really take care of myself. That means I want to hit 200 pounds. My original goal was 190, but now I'm going to make it 200. So that means I'll lose probably 2-ish pounds a week, I think. I'll do the calculations after this. But the main goal behind it is to become a healthy person. Because that's what my dream identity. And hopefully by saying it on this podcast, I'll be more inclined to hold myself accountable, but I'll give you updates on how that journey goes. But it's not only like with health, it's with my weight, it's also like making sure I sleep and I'm mindful and I go on walks and things like that. But that's all the updates. As always, I hope something I said resonated with someone out there, whether that's now or 10 years from now. Either way, thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.